Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. As you know, it's part of our mission to help you guys. So please send any questions you have to us at info@collegeknowledge.net. Hey everybody, welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kerins.
Dave, did you know that MIT students can become fully qualified pirates?
Say what now?
That's right.
What's a qualified pirate?
Well, they can take courses in fencing, they can do sailing, pistol or rifle classes, and they are eligible to receive a pirate's license.
How about it? I want one of those. The things we do in higher ed.
Oh yeah.
So today we're gonna shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the trends we're seeing, and some of the trends that have been noticed across the board, researched, some of the statistics that are out there. I think the first one that really kind of hits home with me is the overall kind of decline in students attending higher education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So there's been a decline since really the peak, which was about 2010 of students going. And I don't think a lot of families understand the decline. And it was specifically males that were declining. Mm-hmm. And it had been on a downtrend since 2010 through 2019. Then the pandemic hit, and it really took a interesting turn because number one, you have a lot of what were historically known as blue collar jobs that are really struggling for employees. And you also had kind of some of the draconian measures taken by the institutions that parents weren't really willing to allow their children to experience. And there's this other kind of thing that's, I think it's known, but it's not talked about, which is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah. And I think in line with that, one of the coming out of the pandemic, we did an episode where we were really shocked at the number of students that applied to, we'll say, elite institutions. And if that was it, but if they didn't get in, they didn't go.
Yeah.
Like it was, I'm only going to go if it's worth it, I guess.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that has also, because that was a trend that was odd. It was, well, I'm going to apply early decision. If I don't get in, I'm not going. Yeah. That was surprising.
And I don't know, like we can get into the psychology behind it. Obviously there's been a lot of studies done on, the parenting that exists now where it's more, trying to prevent failure in kids than allow them to fail and learn the lessons of it. So, you think about the mentality of that. If I don't get into the top institution, I'm not going. Yeah. Is that a like an elitist mentality? Is that a fear of failure mentality? Is that a rejection mentality? Like I've been rejected, so it screw that, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And again, I'm not a psychologist. I did study psychology, but I've never practiced it, nor am I licensed to practice it. However, I look at sort of the participation award type environment we've sort of created here. And the part to me that really is frustrating is that nowhere else for the rest of your life does that matter. Right? You don't get participation awards at work. Right. You don't, the cream rises to the crop. They still, you still get promotions based on performance. You get paid based on your expertise. And so all of a sudden, what are we teaching for such a long period of time? And then Now you're in the workforce and you don't get the promotion, and so would you just quit? And in reality, we've seen a lot of mobility of the workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Switching jobs, doing the job hopping. And, I've done obviously plenty of hiring and firing in my day. And one of the things I'm always looking at on a resume is like, how many times have you jumped and why did you jump?
Yeah.
And so I think the stick to itness is what it comes down to. And yeah, I got into the number 1 school, but what's the number 2 and 3? And are they really, can you honestly, Joe, justify a 1, 2, and 3?
I guess every situation is different, but
you're going to tell me the education at school A, we're talking about schools in the same categories, right? That school A is superior to school B. Tell me how you justify that. Right now, how they justify it is ridiculous. It's on student yield and acceptance rate and all that stuff. The numbers I want to know is, tell me about the other side. Right. The starting salary, the tenure in business, the amount of switching you have to do to get there, the locations you have to work, and things like that. I think that's what really matters.
Yeah, and if I was, I remember we joked about this in school rankings and the system, and I don't believe in it. I know you have reservations as well. But I look at things like the retention rate, how many kids come back year 1 to year 2, graduation rate, almost impossible to find, but how many kids are actually out in 4 years? What's the starting salary? What's the debt that kids are graduating with? That to me that's the important role.
Well, and I think the part that I really struggle with is in this day and age, unfortunately, and this is a shame, we have more technology than we've ever had. We have the ability to compute things faster than we ever have, and I still don't believe any of the statistics are accurate. Right, honestly, we've been sort of, you have to be sort of callous to the statistics that you hear. Yeah. Where were they generated? How are they generated? Did you interview all those people? Is it based on the school saying that?
Sure.
Well, if a school's telling you what the starting salary of their average student is, where did they get that information?
Right. Yeah.
And are they propping it up? Heck yeah, they are.
Oh, sure. Well, just the graduation rate is a simple one. I don't know if many families know this, but a graduation rate is based off 150% of allotted time. So in other words, if you're in a 4-year program, if you graduate in 6 years, you still graduated on time.
Correct.
That's an easy, we graduate 97% of our kids' graduation rate.
And if you don't believe that, go look at any statistic and it'll show you, if it changes that, it'll show you the 6-year graduation rate.
Right. So, but again, there you go. How true is that? A lot of families may not know that.
Yeah.
You think, graduation rate, obviously it's 4 years. But yeah, you can change statistics to make it seem like you are better. Yeah. So
and there's a lot of manipulation in it, without question. And, this all goes back to, Joe, our profession, right? The college is big business.
Oh yeah,
it just is, and you can't shake it. You dropped a line on me earlier, which was another Joe's Did You Know, which was, did I know what the endowment of Harvard was? The largest one in the world, right?
Yeah, $40 billion.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So and again, if you're paying attention to the news right now, there are people pulling out of funding Harvard for some of the stances they've taken. And I think that's a trend we're seeing in higher education. And I'm going to try and stay apolitical on this. But the idea that the institution needs to express its political opinions outside of the political science classroom, and teach people to think and rather tell them what to think is the antithesis of higher education, which is why I think you see the decline in people going, because they're not willing to spend the X amount of dollars to have their kid told what they're supposed to think as opposed to taught how to think.
Sure.
Right. And I think that's a huge thing. And if you're not paying attention to it, eyes up right now. It's running rampant with, whether it's political correctness, whether it's the teaching and indoctrinating kids at schools, right? It's a problem. And I think a lot of times, because of the political environment we're in, professors lose sight of the fact that they're supposed to educate the student on how to think and how to be lifetime learners, not what to think. And because the moment you tell someone what they're supposed to think, you stop the progress of education. and that just can't happen, and it can't persist. And I got to believe the pendulum's going to swing. How long it takes, I don't know. You're talking about $40 billion at Harvard.
Right.
That's an awful lot of money to persist whatever's going on.
Sure.
So, yeah. All right, let's move on to, I think, a trend that is kind of synonymous with the progression that we've watched, right? When you see a decline in the students enrolling in higher education, what's the solution? And a lot of times in society today, our solution is technology. And so we're seeing a very large kind of transition in higher education utilizing technology. It was started pre-pandemic, but man, when the pandemic hit, this goes for corporations, goes for everyone, the online learning environment, the amount of improvement in that stuff has accelerated, whether good or bad, I don't know. It makes it more accessible, right? So there is certainly a trend in higher education to embrace technology, to embrace artificial intelligence. That one to me is still tricky, right? Because the artificial intelligence piece, you can use that for positive, you can use that for negative.
Sure.
And so I think it's a very fine line that the schools are going to have to walk. And that one may backfire, but we certainly see more online programs. If you've paid attention on TV ads, there are definitely schools that are promoting their online stuff more than they are promoting their in-person stuff.
Yeah.
And there's also a trend, which this one's really interesting to me. When you look at the decline in overall enrollments, we are seeing an increase in enrollments at more advanced ages.
That's, I thought you were going to go, actually, the one area that's been increasing is two types of schools: community colleges and for-profit institutions.
Yep.
So I thought you were going to go, that was like, oh, that was something I was going to bring up. But yeah, and the rise there has been that there have been a lot of adults that started college, didn't finish, and now are going back.
Yeah.
And, so, and with the ability to, I don't have to go to a campus, I can take those classes at home.
Correct.
Yeah, that piece has increased
and finish out that degree. I mean, if distribution of college students by age, so 55% are under 21, 27% are 22 to 29, and 18% are 30 plus. That's a substantial increase. And so this brings back an interesting concept, because is the juice worth the squeeze? Right? That was how I started this. Yeah. Is affording college and paying for it worth the outcome? And if, again, I'm digging into the statistics, if people 30 plus are now reverting back to college, why? Right? What are they getting a clue about? Is it career advancement? Not going to get past a certain line if you don't have it, right? Is the diploma, the paper, the thing that gives you the opportunity? I think in a lot of instances it is. I think when you get to, let's say you've climbed as, and I'll use the military as an example, right? If you enlist in the military, you've got one scale. If you go to college and you go into the officer training school, you have a whole different scale, and you can't make the flip from one to the other without going through the higher ed component of it. Yeah. So are they getting to the maximum capability in their profession without the degree, realizing that if they want to take that next step, the degree is a necessary thing? Sure. So I think corporations are still holding true to it. Now, I have seen some articles recently where they're saying some corporations are dropping the college requirement for certain levels of jobs and things like that, which I think is intelligent, because the one big question I've always had is, are you prepared, ready, and is it the right time to get that education between the age of 18 to 22? Are you mature enough to appreciate it? And I think what we're seeing is people are now, they get to 30, 35, and they're like, man, I wish I did it. And they're going back and doing it, and they have more of an appreciation for the learning.
Sure. I'm always curious too, is it that, do you have a job and you are, like, the employer is helping cover those costs? Sure. Right. Can that be some type of advantage as well? The other side of it too is, I've always kind of had the idea, when people kind of ask me, I talk about some of these issues and what has to change. And again, I think part of it is that employers necessarily, I don't say you have to have the college degree, but at the same time, you can say, what courses have you taken? Right. And now all of a sudden you kind of can say, well, if you've taken these core courses that are essential in the role that you would need to fill, if you took those courses and you learned it, you can apply what you've learned to do this job. Do you need all the other prerequisites, all the other courses towards a degree to actually do this job that have nothing to do with the job you're about to do? I mean, it would be tough, but it's almost like, here's my transcripts rather than my degree. Here's what I've studied, and here's the grades that I've gotten in the courses that would apply to me doing this job. I don't know, if that's it, but I've always been curious about that too. Is that are some parents, I don't want to say parents, but older individuals realizing that, okay, for me to move up, I need to understand this. There's not a exact like training course. The only way to get it,
thing that you got to go through. It's like, hey, I got to make that choice because I need to understand this to do that.
So is it, and again, some of those numbers, is it full-time? Is it just enrolled? Is it part-time? Is it, hey, I'm going to take a course so that I can better my knowledge, not necessarily work towards a degree, but just better my knowledge so that I can do my job better and look better for my employer. So some of those things are always questions that I have. Like when we talk statistics, like, is it that people are working towards a degree or to better themselves? Are they working for a separate degret? So I wasn't sure the reports you were looking at, if it was
and I didn't dig into the reports from that standpoint. Let me see if it.
But those are the questions I would have that if I was interviewing the person that wrote this article, like, okay, I want to do a deeper dive. I want to know what this actually is rather than just say, hey, enrollment's up. Well, is it enrollment up with people that already have a degree that are working for a second one? Is it enrollment that they're, part-time taking a couple classes just to better their knowledge? What exactly are these people truly going to school for? Those would be some of the questions that I have. But it is all the while interesting because I think without the technology advances, you would not see those numbers increase without a doubt.
No doubt about it. There's another piece of that technology thing that I think is warranted and worth speaking about. Right. In the early onset of virtual, remote, or electronic education, there was a capacity. Right. And so the capacity may be, you could do it, but you had, 30 people enrolled in that. And they treated it very similar to how they treated a classroom.
Yeah.
Well, you have this new sort of trend called a massive open online course. And it is an unlimited enrollment course. So you could have 100,000 people taking the course at the same time. It's paced, but it's self-study with lecture and all that's recorded. And so now you have the ability to serve, 80,000 people, whereas before maybe it was 500 was the max, or maybe it was 250, or maybe it was 100, depending on the capabilities.
Sure.
But and a lot of that as a result of, you look at Cisco WebEx, you look at the improvements we've made in that technology. Now, not only can you record it and produce it, but in real time, you can have a whiteboard showing on the screen with a lecture happening. And so you're seeing the capabilities of that being real. And so you're able to service more people at the same time, which it certainly has a play into it.
Yeah. And that's where, I've almost anything in this world, you have, and I know we've talked about this. I first heard this one. I heard a speech on a doctor talking about the healthcare costs. You can have affordability, right? Quality and availability. You can improve two of the three. You can never get all three. Very hard, right?
Yeah.
You can increase the affordability, but
you give up the quality
or the availability, right? It's not as many people can do it. And I think that is an interesting trend because we've talked about people that have tried to bring something to the table and how to lower the rising cost of college. And in my world, this is something I was hearing for the first time that you're saying, but it's always been one of those things. Okay, well, if I can have a class that has a price point on it that is given to 500 people, well, how much profit do you make off of that? Well, can you make the same amount of profit off of that and increase it to 5,000? And what happens is now
the bottom line
the
is
cost comes down, right? So there's an easy way that if a school can essentially avoid the greed to say, well, if we can offer this to almost an endless number of people, we can afford a quality education at a very affordable price,
Mm-hmm.
and the availability is there. Now, the problem is that would an employer now look at that as a quality education? And I think that's where, when online schools first came out, when you had DeVry, Strayer, University of Phoenix, I know that there was a lot of employers that basically said, well, we don't hire people that earn those degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would that be a trend that all of a sudden people now have this degree, but now they say, oh, it's not a real degree because you got it from this, right? That would be the downside of that. But I think it's an interesting gateway to say, look, a college can be extremely, like all colleges are profitable. They're not, we say they're nonprofits, most profitable nonprofits that exist.
Without question.
That is a extremely interesting take that I have yet to hear anyone bring to the table, right? When you talk about all the politicians and how can we do, hey, let's have essentially colleges that these are the rules that you can charge this much, that you make a profit off of this class.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how many students enroll, you make the same profit. But if 10 times the amount of the cost just went down 10 times as much. It's just an it's something I never thought about. And you telling me that was the first thing that went through my mind.
Thanks everyone for being a part of College Knowledge, powered by Elite Collegiate Planning. Just as an FYI, we are guaranteeing that you will save money on college by working with ECP. This is a guarantee that you will pay less. Book a free consultation at elitecollegiateplanning.com. Well, yeah, and there's another piece too that, and this all kind of ties in to doing versus learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I've been asked many times, my intention was to go to law school. When I graduated college, I was sort of like, all right, I'm pretty smart.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather go test my mettle and see what I can do. And so then I was like, maybe I should get an MBA. And I intended to start a business and get into it. And I look back now and I've sort of always had this lingering like chirp in my brain, like you should get an MBA.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't know why. And as I turned 40, I reflected on like, what I did, how I've done. And, I tell people now as an entrepreneur that my MBA is in practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's in what I did, the pain that I felt, the loans that I took, the repayments I had to make, the expansions I had to do, the moving and the hiring and the firing and I've learned all those lessons. And so when I go back now, what would they teach me in the MBA?
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes me back to the declining trend in college. Like, is it better to get the general overall education, or is it better to come learn the thing that you want to do? And I think that's a big question that everybody has to ask themselves.
Yeah.
Right. I preach about liberal arts education, and people, because it's got the word liberal in it, they think it's they think it's some political stance or some
great episode on that topic as well.
Some useless degree. But what my education did was taught me how to think, period. I had to think about things that I'd never thought about, right? One of the classes I took was why do we speak? Well, the end result is because we can. We have the mental and physical capabilities of doing it, so we figured out how to do it.
Sure.
That was 3 months but we went down every rabbit hole of, civilization decline and how communication worked and what they were capable of. So, but it forced you to think critically about a lot of things. And so I regret none of my education because I came out with a pretty sharp mind on how to solve problems and how to, first of all, establish that there is a problem, define what the problem is, and then create the solution for it. So I don't know. I'm sort of, and would I be where I am today had I gone and gotten an MBA?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Would I be better? I don't know. Maybe.
Sure.
Would I have had the lifetime experience that I have? No, that's the one thing, because I would have spent 2.5 or 3 years still in academia, and I wouldn't have had the jump start that I did. So I don't know.
Yeah, one other thing, we interview a ton of just phenomenal professors,
100%,
and that is something that I don't think we want to have the shift full to technology, and it would be something like in that class, that mass virtual class that you don't have, right? There are valuable skills that you learn not in the classroom on a college campus. meaning the interaction with people.
Oh, the social, the emotional, all that stuff is huge.
Being able to go into a professor's office and talk to them. I mean, every professor that we talk to, they enjoy what they're doing. And the more that the students come to them, the better a job they can do for those. Again, you lose some of that aspect with a virtual learning environment.
Yeah.
So you can't go 100% that direction. But if somebody really wants to tackle this issue, right, I think that is a very interesting concept that I'm waiting to see who kind of runs with that first. If it hasn't taken place yet, like who essentially offers like, hey, you can get a degree for $5,000.
Yeah.
But it's going to be offered to 50,000 people. Okay.
Yeah,
like,
and is that sort of like the certificates that you get today? Does it become
sure?
More,
and that's my concern with it is that
it diminishes
quality, right?
the quality.
It's now it's the affordability and the availability, but now it's doesn't hold as much weight as an actual on-campus diploma, degree.
Yeah. And I think, a post-COVID trend in our country and probably around the world, I've not studied around the world. I've certainly studied the demographics in our country, is the idea of hybrid things. Mm-hmm. Right. We are pro-hybrid right now. Everything is pro-hybrid, right? Hybrid learning, hybrid work environments, hybrid meeting schedules.
Sure.
It's all hybrid. So there is this trend in higher education about the hybrid environment, the hybrid learning, some on campus, some off campus. Where this was really established well, in my opinion, is Drexel and Northeastern. And we did those 2 interviews with Ian Sladen and Manny Contamanolis at Northeastern, both the heads of their co-op programs. And what those 2 schools have done historically, and a lot of schools have followed their lead, but those 2 schools had an incredible co-op environment where you would study for either a trimester or 2 semesters, and then you would go out for a semester and you would take a job and learn in real time on the job what that job is actually about. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of, to me, the original hybrid learning environment, but with purpose of getting a job and finding a job and realizing what you like and don't like. And I think that some of the hybrid stuff we're talking about now is like, hey, you don't even have to show up to a classroom. You just log into your computer and you can listen. Mm-hmm. And I don't care what you say. I don't care what statistics you show me. The learning that happens in person is far superior to the learning that happens online.
Yeah.
Because of the dialogue and the discourse and the conversations and the between the lines and the body language and the stuff that just happens.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of take that a step further in the workplace and say, everybody wants to stay at home and work. And I can tell you as a business owner that when everybody does that, they become static. Mm-hmm. They don't learn the intangibles of the water cooler. They don't learn I call it the doorway conversations. When you're walking by someone's office and you had a question, it's like, hey, can I steal your brain for a minute?
Yeah.
That type of stuff is crazy good for people's growth.
Absolutely.
I also think that, you may be a great technician in a role that you play, and your manager may be very good at managing, and you may want that job someday. And if you're never around that person and all you're doing is filling out your report and submitting you don't know what they do. You don't understand what their actual job is. And so you're going to see this kind of limited upward mobility because the innate learning that occurs around each other doesn't happen now. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to see a whiplash.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I digress.
No, all good.
A huge trend that, we did it to ourselves, but is mental health. Mm. There's a report and I'll cite it, but
talking to statistics again.
it's tragic. And there was a study by the National Center for Education Statistics. Again, I can't validate this. I'm citing a sighting, right? Mm-hmm. So 20 million of the 20 million students enrolled in institutions of higher learning in 2019, this is pre-pandemic, 19.9 million. Of the 20, 19.9 had mental health challenges. And that's the Imagine American Foundation 2020. Depression, eating disorders, anxiety, addiction, suicide are some of the mental health issues in the college students. And then according to the American College Health Association, the ACHA, 60% and 40% of students also suffered from anxiety and depression, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
That is scary.
Very.
And, I'm not a doctor. Not a mental health physician,
mm-hmm.
but what causes that?
I don't know. And immediately I go to, is that part of the reason that the decline is is it too stressful? Is it something that from a mental health side that the enrollments have dropped as well? I don't know.
I don't think it's the stress of it, Joe, because the stress was there when I was in college.
Sure.
I spent those all-nighters before my economics exams. I dealt with all that, the deadline of the paper that had to be perfect and the presentation that was happening the next day and all that stuff. What I really think is it's the number one, take my ball and go home. Right. Or if something doesn't, I equate it. So I have 4 children. My youngest is 4. She's on the back end of throwing tantrums. Right. And a tantrum is just an absolute awesome thing to experience. Being the 4th child, it was not fun for the first ones, but now it's like, what is she trying to say? What is upsetting her to the point where she's going absolutely berserk? And that manifestation, and I don't try and solve the tantrum. I wait for it to calm down, ask what's going on, and then, well, what's a solution? Give them the coping mechanisms to produce that outcome. I feel like there's a lot of time where we just sort of, the coping was give a screen or give some other solution that was a tractor beam. And so they didn't learn coping mechanism. They didn't learn some of that stuff. And now, now you have there's a direct statistical correlation to likes on Facebook or Instagram, or likes you don't get that create some of that.
I mean, immediately my first thought was social media.
Yeah. Well, without question, that has a huge impact.
Yeah.
I heard a cool quote the other day I want to share, by the way. When you want their childhood to end, give them social media. So
that's powerful there. Jesus. But just the negative effects of it. Right. And I think it does impact younger students more. I also think that, one of the questions I would have with that, and it was 19.9 have what do they call it? What are they?
A mental health challenge.
A mental health challenge. So again, my critical, what does that mean?
Yeah. What is a challenge? Does I get sad once in a while? We all get sad.
Right.
Is it clinical depression? Different ballgame.
Correct. Right. So I would be curious as to what that essentially means. Part of that.
And I think from a society standpoint, we've seen the teen suicides. We've seen that. So we have to be well more conscious of like where is it a disorder and a diagnosis versus a thing that you need to pull through. And again, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form I know any of this. I'm just simply looking at it going, have we softened the definition to a point where, and by virtue of necessity, because the kid you don't help the one time is the one that ends up being the story in the newspaper, and nobody wants that. And so, but when you tell 19.9 million out of 20 million students, that's insanity. That's 99.9%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's frightening, but again, I think where I was getting to is what does that definition mean? And then that's where I think you're hitting the nail on the head is, are we softening that definition? But at the same time, can you not soften it?
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
I mean,
I got 4 kids.
You're not going to,
nope.
So it's a tough piece to look at. But I think also, I wonder if part of this also gets into, this was as of 20, God, so this was before the pandemic. That's right. Yeah. Because if there's 20 million college students, that's a number from a couple of years ago because it's gone down since then.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, it's just scary to think about. Ultimately, I mean, it's scared, but at the same time, is there at some point, does that become the cane that people leave on, or is there a little bit of, it's the real world, you got to toughen up a little bit? I don't know.
So here's the part where I cannot believe this statistic. However, it's documented and cited. So, in the article, it says 19.9 had mental health challenges. In the infographic, it says 19.9 million, the number of first-year students with mental health concerns. So, like, are they just concerned that they will have mental health problems, or are they concerned that they may have something? Is it like the time you have a beer and you go, "Am I an alcoholic?" And you're like, man, but you're not. You don't. It's not an addictive thing. Like, sure. I don't know. So,
and I guess the other thing too is, how do you get to that number? Is it a poll?
Yeah,
correct. Like, you didn't. I don't think you asked 19.9 million students these questions.
Yeah. Again, I have no idea how to do it. But let's switch to what higher ed is doing about it.
Sure.
Because I think that's what people want to know. Yeah. Right. So at every institution now, there are certainly mental health awareness departments. There are places you can go for help, wellness programs. There are counseling services. There are ways to teach resilience. We're sort of taking it in an approach of, you have to recognize it, but you also have to coach through it, right? That's the deal. So we're seeing an awful lot of support in that arena.
Yeah.
Now, the other side of that too is from the support side, right? Are we sort of mislabeling at times that stuff? And I don't know, if my child came to me and said, I'm not feeling good about myself, I'd be asking more questions and digging into it. And so, and not that I would never diminish mental health disorders, because they are rough, and helping people through that should be a number one focus. But I also think are you sad? Why are you sad? Are you sad every day and can't get out of bed? Now we're talking a different ball game. So again, I think the support is important, and the schools are stepping up to do it.
Yeah. And I think definitely when you have parents, when you have college-bound students and you're doing a visit to a school, this is one of those areas that you should be asking questions and visiting that facility. Understand what type of support that school they all have them. Some schools do it better than others,
without question.
You need to know that should there be some adversity from a mental health side that your child may be facing, does the school have the capabilities to support your child? Right. Make sure that you're looking into that is extremely important when you do a college visit. Not just tour the campus, this looks good, ask a couple questions. Make sure you visit that facility and ask questions to somebody that's there, right? Feel comfortable that that should they need that support, it's available to them, and they know where it is. Even before you chose the school on a visit, where that building is, someone at that building, exactly what to do, where it is. It's not a place where you would want there to be any additional hurdles to overcome should your child feel like they need help. And I think part of that too is, we've talked about this for years. I grew up that I thought asking for help was always a weakness.
Yeah.
And it's one of the biggest things that I have learned in my lifetime, in my career, that it's actually a strength, if you do it the right way. And so little things like going on a college visit with your child and going to that, you're basically telling them it's okay. Like, we're going here for a reason.
Yeah.
It is okay to ask for help. And when you need help, this is where it is. This is obviously important to us that this.
Yeah. And if you're a regular listener to this podcast, right, you've heard professors that we've interviewed say they love to help where they can, but the students got to come to them, whether it be about education, whether it be about mental health, whether it be about direction. Like, am I in the wrong major? Like, think about the anxiety of knowing that you don't want to do that for the rest of your life, but yet you feel forced into that. Like, that's a tough thing to come to grips with. Now, I think I can make the point I was trying to make more clearly now. When I went to college, I got homesick without question. I was outside my comfort zone, meeting new people every day, didn't know where to be, when to be, how to be, didn't know how to study. There were a lot of things. And I think what I'm concerned with is hey, homesickness is a thing, right? You're outside your comfort zone. Is it a thing you can get over? Is it a thing we're helping? Or is it a thing that drives you down into that worst crater? And I think that's where, hey, let's make sure we're addressing what's really going on and pushing and helping people cope and move through it. So,
yeah.
All right. I think something else that we're seeing in higher education that is a tragic result, and this one may be political, but I don't really care. We watched the SAT get easier. And I'm not sure what we were battling and why we did that. It kind of goes with the participation environment. And listen, I've got 3 daughters and a son, ages 12 down to 4, and my 4-year-old plays soccer. Participation awards is absolute because all she cares about is the trophy at the end, right? And it's not like they keep score. So,
yeah.
But the moment it starts becoming true competition and there is score, right? That stuff's got to go away. So why would we lessen the SAT so that you do better on an easier test? So now we have instead of you used to have a person would get a perfect score on the SAT. It was like it happened every once in a while.
Right.
Now we're getting thousands a year.
Sure.
What's the benefit?
Feel good. Because I think the downside, I don't see much of a benefit because it makes a harder job on a college admissions counselor.
Correct.
To admit the right students, because you are going to, and it's been shown and proven that when you lessen the requirements, right? So you make the test easier. So now more people have a higher score that they now meet a certain requirement. Correct. But then when they're accepted to that school, they don't make it. Like it's the academic rigor at an elite institution that had that high score as a standard. Well, now you've made the test easier. You accept kids that maybe weren't deserving. They come to the school and they don't finish there.
But it has a trickle down effect too, because then the colleges are making their courses easier. Are they like, we're talking about the
right, and the only way to get away from that dropout rate is to continue to cater to that.
Correct.
You change your entire environment rather than the people that are coming in to evolve and become better. Like you're lessening your output. Right. You're lessening what they will learn so that they have better grades and you look better on paper from a ranking standpoint, from a statistics standpoint.
Yeah.
But again, you're diluting the value of that. And unfortunately, I don't think you would see the effect of that until 20 years down the road. It's like, okay, are we the people like that you talk about the cream rising? Well, is it now all of a sudden that nobody has that level of education? But how are we going to know those people that are getting that education now with lesser requirements, an easier degree? How do they, when do we actually find out that there was a true downside? It's not until later.
No, without question.
So I don't know.
And it's an interesting thing that's going on. They'll put it under the guise of diversity. They'll put it under the guise of all these different things. In reality, it's trying to eliminate the competition factor, but that all stops when you get to the workforce, right? If you fail to do your job, you will lose your job.
Right.
And if you fail to do your job to an excellent level, you will not get promoted in the next place. So it comes full circle at some point. So, all right. I think I've done enough damage for today towards higher ed.
My mind is rolling.
Now, mind you, I completely support going to get it. I just think you have to be more critical of it now. You have to think and you have to make critical decisions. We talk about the best fit, Joe, and the best fit is the social, the academic, and the financial fit for the family. And I think that is more necessary to evaluate today than it has ever been.
100%.
All right, everybody. That's been College Knowledge for today. Some trends in higher education. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're on, you can go to collegeknowledge.net. As always, we thank our sponsor, the College Planning Network.
Take care.
Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. Just a reminder, if you're sending your student to school, visit elitecollegiateplanning.com for free resources and to book a free consultation. Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.